Today I woke up and noticed something strange in my body. Have you ever felt an inexplicable change, as if something profound is happening inside you? Imagine discovering that these transformations are clear signs of a spiritual awakening. What would these unusual changes be, and how can they impact your life in ways you never imagined? Have you ever noticed a different sensation, a mysterious tingling, or even sudden mental clarity? What if I told you that these experiences are more common than you think and can indicate a deeper connection with the universe? Stay with me, because throughout this video, we'll dive together into 8 surprising transformations in the body that reveal a spiritual awakening. And believe me, number 5 will leave you stunned. Has it ever happened to you? Let's find out together. If you enjoy this enlightening exploration, consider showing your support by clicking the Super Thanks button below. By supporting this channel, you become part of a community that values truth, self-discovery, and spiritual enlightenment. You know, I've always been quite skeptical when it came to energy and spirituality, but lately I've started to notice some really strange changes in myself, especially an increased energetic sensitivity. Suddenly, it felt like I could sense the energy around me with an intensity I had never experienced before. It was as if I could perceive people's auras, like a kind of glow or vibration around them. And it wasn't just that. Sometimes I felt thermal changes, like certain areas around me were getting hotter or colder for no apparent reason. Not to mention the vibrations, it was almost as if the air was trembling in certain situations. At first, this left me quite unsettled, but then I started to accept it and even find it interesting. Another thing that changed radically was my sleep pattern. I've always been a heavy sleeper, but suddenly I started having insomnia and waking up between 2 and 4 in the morning for no apparent reason. And it wasn't that groggy kind of waking up. I would wake up completely alert, as if I had slept through the entire night. And the strangest thing, I didn't feel the same need for sleep as before. I could sleep much less and still feel refreshed. Initially, this worried me. I thought I had some health problem. But talking to some people and doing some research, I discovered that this is a common symptom of those going through a spiritual awakening. It seems that the body needs less rest when the mind is in this state of transformation. And food? That also underwent a major turnaround. I've always been a junk food fan, but suddenly I started feeling an aversion to processed foods. My body seemed to crave more natural and healthy foods. Fruits, vegetables, whole grains, all of these started to seem much more appealing. I even went through a period where I completely lost my appetite. I had no desire to eat anything, and yet I felt good, full of energy. It was such a drastic change that some people around me started to worry. But to me, it seemed like my body was finally aligning with what it really needed. These changes I'm telling you about were by no means the only ones. I started to feel a series of inexplicable physical symptoms, constant headaches, a strange pressure right in the middle of my forehead, which I later discovered many people call third eye pressure. Additionally, I felt body pains that would come out of nowhere and disappear just as suddenly. I've never paid much attention to these things, but these pains intrigued me. I went to the doctor, had tests done, and nothing showed up. That's when I began to consider that maybe these symptoms were related to some kind of energetic adjustment, something my rational mind had difficulty accepting, but that my body seemed to be experiencing. Another thing that changed was my intuition. I've always trusted logic and reason, but suddenly I started having premonitions and feeling a much stronger connection with my inner self. It was as if my mind had opened a door to a flow of information and sensations that I used to ignore or didn't perceive. I started having dreams that seemed premonitory, sensations that something was about to happen, and soon after, it actually did. And not just that, I started to notice that I could pick up on people's thoughts and emotions in an almost telepathic way. Initially, it was scary, But then I started to see it as a valuable tool to better understand the world and the people I interacted with. If you enjoy this enlightening exploration, consider showing your support by clicking the Super Thanks button below. By supporting this channel, you become part of a community that values truth, self-discovery, and spiritual enlightenment. Alongside all this, my emotions also became much more intense. It was as if I were experiencing everything with the volume turned all the way up. I could cry or laugh uncontrollably for reasons that would have seemed trivial before. Emotions came in waves, and I felt the need to release them, like an emotional cleansing. These crying or laughing fits were a way for my body and mind to adjust to this new reality. Initially, I felt somewhat lost, but then I realized that this emotional intensity was part of the process of reconnecting with my true self, of clearing out traumas and repressed emotions that I had probably been carrying for years. And vision. That was another area where I noticed significant changes. Suddenly, I started seeing lights flashing in the corners of my eyes, like little explosions of light around me. I also became much more sensitive to light, needing to wear sunglasses more often, even on cloudy days. Additionally, I began to perceive shapes and colors differently, almost as if the world around me had gained a new layer of depth and visual richness. At first, I thought I might have a vision problem, but then I realized that these changes were linked to this entire process of spiritual awakening that I was experiencing. With all these changes, my interests and hobbies also went through a transformation. Things that had fascinated me before began to lose their appeal, and I started to feel drawn to new interests. Spiritual practices, meditation, reading esoteric texts, and seeking spiritual knowledge began to occupy an important place in my life. It was as if my being was being pulled towards something greater, something that made more sense in this new context I was living in. I began to seek out groups and communities of people who were going through similar experiences, and this helped me better understand everything that was happening to me. Anyway, all these changes caught me by surprise, but they also opened up a new world of possibilities and understandings. Each symptom, each transformation, seemed to be another step on this path of spiritual awakening. And despite the initial discomfort, I started to embrace these changes, understanding that they were part of a much larger process of growth and self-knowledge. I don't know exactly where all this will lead me, but I feel that I am on the right path, aligned with something that has always been there, waiting to be discovered. And you know what's most curious about all this? Despite all these changes, I didn't feel more lost than I had felt before. On the contrary, it seemed that finally the pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fall into place. Each symptom, each sensation, each new perception came with a sort of inner understanding, as if my body and mind were communicating in a way I had never experienced before. For example, the increased energetic sensitivity. At first, I thought I was going crazy, that these perceptions were the result of some hallucination or delusion. But gradually, I began to realize that these sensations were real and had a purpose. When I felt that vibration in the air, or when I perceived people's auras, it was as if I was receiving additional information about the environment and about others' intentions. I started to trust these perceptions more and use them to guide my daily interactions. It was like having an internal radar that helped me navigate the world with greater clarity and confidence. And the sleep pattern changes? Before, I thought waking up in the middle of the night was a sign of some problem. But now I understand that these moments of wakefulness are opportunities for introspection and meditation. It's like my body is giving me a gentle reminder to stop and reflect, to connect with that deeper part of myself that I used to ignore. In those moments, I take the time to meditate, to read, or simply to sit in silence and listen to my thoughts. And surprisingly, These quiet moments have become some of the most productive and revealing parts of my day. The issue of food was also a great revelation. I would never have imagined that my dietary preferences could change so drastically. But as my body began to reject processed foods and crave more natural options, I realized that this change was not just physical, but also spiritual. Eating more consciously and healthily became a way to honor my body and the vital energy it carries. And this led me to explore practices like intermittent fasting and intuitive eating, where I listen to what my body really needs instead of following rigid dietary patterns. Speaking of inexplicable physical symptoms, those episodes of pressure on the third eye were particularly intriguing. Initially, it seemed like just a localized headache, but soon I realized it was more than that. It was as if that pressure was activating a new form of perception, as if my body was adjusting to access a different level of consciousness. And the body pains? They came and went without any apparent pattern, but I started to notice that they mostly occurred when I was going through moments of deep introspection or emotional change. It was as if my body was releasing old energies and patterns, preparing for a new way of being. Intuition also flourished in ways I could never have predicted. I began to have a sort of knowing that came from within without any logical explanation. It was as if I knew things without knowing how I knew, and these intuitions proved to be incredibly accurate. I started to trust that inner voice more, to follow those hunches and allow them to guide my decisions. This led me to make decisions that I would have otherwise hesitated or ignored, and the results were surprisingly positive. I saw here that you haven't left your like yet. This is very important for YouTube to deliver our content and continue helping you. So leave a like on this video, it's free. And the emotional intensity. At first it was a real whirlwind. I, who had always been a relatively controlled person, found myself crying or laughing with an intensity I had never experienced before. But instead of fighting these emotions, I began to embrace them. I realized that these emotional waves were a form of purification, of releasing everything that was trapped inside me. And gradually, I began to feel a lightness and emotional clarity I had never felt before. It was as if all those repressed emotions had finally found an outlet, allowing me to reconnect with my true essence. The changes in vision were another fascinating aspect of this process. Those flashes of light and increased sensitivity to brightness made me question my sanity, but soon I realized they were part of a bigger adjustment. I began to see the world with new eyes, literally. There was a vividness, an intensity in colors and shapes that I had never noticed before, and this wasn't limited to physical vision. My perception of the world, of people, and of situations also became clearer and deeper. It was as if I was seeing beyond appearances, capturing the true essence of things. And of course, with all these internal changes, my interests and hobbies also transformed. Activities that used to bring me joy began to seem empty and purposeless. Instead, I began to feel drawn to practices that nourished my soul. Meditation, yoga, reading spiritual and esoteric texts, all of this became part of my daily routine. And it wasn't just about seeking knowledge, but really integrating these practices into my life, living according to these new understandings. This led me to find communities of like-minded individuals, and these connections became a source of support and inspiration. Additionally, I began to notice that these changes were reflected in my interpersonal relationships. People who had been part of my social circle started to drift away, while new connections emerged, often with individuals who were going through similar experiences. It was as if my vibration was changing and consequently attracting people who resonated with this new frequency. These new friendships brought a sense of community and understanding I had never experienced before. Another interesting aspect was the change in my relationship with time. Before, I was always racing against the clock, constantly worried about deadlines and commitments. But with the spiritual awakening, I began to perceive time differently. I started to value the present moment more, to be truly present in my daily activities. This shift in perspective brought me a calmness and serenity that had previously seemed unattainable. I discovered that by living in the present, worries about the future and anxieties about the past lost their power over me. And of course, with all these changes came a deep sense of purpose. I began to question my role in the world and seek ways to align my life with this new spiritual understanding. This led me to reconsider my career, my goals, and my values. I started to seek ways to contribute more meaningfully, to use my talents and skills to make a positive difference. And surprisingly, these changes in direction brought a satisfaction and a sense of fulfillment I had never experienced before. All this made me realize that spiritual awakening is a continuous and multifaceted process. It's not something that happens overnight, but a journey of self-discovery and transformation. And although it can be unsettling and even painful at times, it is also deeply rewarding. Each change, each symptom, each new perception is another step on this journey of growth and evolution. And despite all the uncertainties, I feel a deep gratitude for experiencing this. And now, I want you to pause for a moment and reflect. Of these 8 unusual changes, how many have you noticed in yourself? Could you be on the path of spiritual awakening and not even realize it? And if these transformations in your body are just the beginning of something even bigger and deeper, imagine what else might be revealing itself within you, waiting to be discovered. And if I told you that these changes are just the tip of the iceberg, that there are other dimensions of your being awakening, ready to completely transform your reality? Have you ever stopped to think about the infinite potential that resides within you? The power you have to shape your own spiritual journey? What if you could access even deeper levels of consciousness? How would this impact your daily life, your relationships, your choices? Think about the moments when you felt an inexplicable connection with the universe, as if everything made sense. Those moments are not coincidences. They are signs, invitations for you to explore more, to know yourself more, to awaken more. Now, I invite you to share in the comments your personal experiences with these changes. Which one impacted you the most? Which one surprised you? And most importantly, which transformation do you feel is about to happen in your life? If you found this exploration insightful and transformative, consider showing your support by clicking the Super Thanks button below. Your contribution helps us continue bringing you valuable content that delves into the depths of spirituality and reveals ancient wisdom. Remember, spiritual awakening is a continuous journey. Today, we discuss these 8 unusual changes. But what does the universe have in store for you tomorrow? Stay alert, connected, and above all, open to the infinite possibilities available to you. Every detail, every sensation can be a clue, a sign of your awakening. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and above all, keep evolving. Until next time, truth seekers, stay awake and connected to the sanctum of wisdom. Namaste.